Hello everyone, so basically I have noticed that over the past couple of weeks I have accumulated a huge stack of new books, and I thought what better way to celebrate these new little purchases than doing a haul. Now I haven't read all of these, so I might split these into categories. I'll quickly show you what I've purchased, then I'll talk to you about the books that I have read, and then we'll discuss why I bought the ones that I am yet to read. So we'll jump straight into the video. So I have 4 young adult books here. I have Everything by Nicola Yoon. I have Cybex Mayberry by Julia Murphy. I have The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth, and I have Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven. So these are my young adult books. I also have one bibliography here. This is by Tolhurst, who was a former member of one of my absolute favourite bands of all time, The Cure. And then I have 1984 by George Orwell. And the last 2 books, I have The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, and then I have Genetics for Dummies. So in terms of books I have read, we'll start with The Prince. Now, as I was saying, The Prince is a really interesting book because it's one of those really influential books that a lot of people quote and misquote, and a lot of people sort of attribute to their success and a new way of thinking. So again, not planning to go into business, but I just thought it was interesting to read. So basically, I'll summarise what this is. So Niccolo Machiavelli actually sent this to a newly appointed prince as sort of like an advisory letter. Now this letter ended up being transformed into this quite short book. I think it's only 80-something pages. Yeah, 85 pages. So it's quite short. The text is pretty small, but you know, in the scheme of things, it's quite short. Although for a letter, this is a mammoth letter. So in it, he basically goes through a lot of anecdotes through history of people who have performed their princely duty well and not well, and given really clear examples on how they have either succeeded or failed in these roles. So it's really interesting as a sort of look at ruling. Really not relevant to me, and it is a little bit dated, but when you are, I guess, applying it to the business world, it's really easily to translate. I actually quite enjoyed it. It was interesting. It's a bit of a slog because it's a lot of names and people that from history that I don't necessarily know, some obscure ones, some less obscure ones. And it's probably important to touch on a quote that's really heavily misquoted nowadays. So everyone thinks the prince's overall, I guess, point is that it's better to be feared than loved. Now, I, having read this, totally disagree with how that message has been translated or mistranslated. For me, the prince basically says that you should have a healthy mixture of fear and love in your ruling. So you have to be a strong ruler, but also one that's well liked, otherwise they'll revolt. As soon as you are hated, that's when things just completely fall apart for you. So, I mean, in life, I guess that's a pretty good message. You know, you've got to be strong, but at the same time, treat people well, treat people fairly, and they'll do the same by you. So, I enjoyed this. It's one that I can say I've read now. How applicable it is, I'm not sure, but I recommend it, I guess, if you're interested in entering the business world. It's apparently meant to have been a big help for a lot of people. We'll move on to Everything by Nicola Yoon. Now, this was a young adult book, and it basically is about, you know, Bubble Boy. I think there was a movie made about him. This is basically about Bubble Girl. She's apparently allergic to everything. Her house has been super modified so that, you know, no pollen or air from outside can get in. She's only ever been inside her house. She's never left. The air's all filtered. She can't contact anyone unless they've been disinfected and checked. And, you know, she lives this really obscure life, sort of trapped in this house and in her room. And through that, she ends up watching her neighbor, and they end up forming a bit of relationship just, you know, through looking at each other, and then eventually, you know, connecting by, I think, text and email, and then eventually they meet, and it sort of continues from there. So I don't want to talk any more about this plot-wise, because I think I'll spoil it if I say anything else. This was interesting, but I will say the twist might be predictable. So there is a twist in this book, but yeah, I don't want to say the execution was bad, but I had a feeling that it had almost been done before, but I don't know in what. So, I mean, that might just be me remembering something or having seen something. But overall, this was an interesting book. It's an interesting take on a girl's life, this sort of weird life. The twist and what happens at the end is really, really interesting, really quite interesting. But again, yeah, I'm not sure if it was done totally in the most unexpected way, but in saying that, it's still a really interesting story, so readable, and yeah, I definitely recommend this, and the cover's beautiful. And the next two I want to talk about is Cybex Mayberry and The Miseducation of Cameron Post. Now, my friend actually lent these both to me, so they're going back to her this weekend. We'll start with Cybex and Mayberry. Now, I loved this. Okay, so we're thinking young adult. This is about Alice, a cancer victim, so I'm sure a lot of you at this point are thinking, yep, how many of these stories are there? This is different. I actually really like this. This does not glorify Alice, who is dealing with cancer, who is suffering from cancer, who is fighting cancer. It does not glorify her in any way. She is a human. She at times does very selfish things, but again, just very human things. She's got this list that she wants Harvey to help her with, sort of like righting the wrongs that people have done to her, and just exploring her relationships and the psychology of thinking that you're on such a limited time, you know, and how that relates to your relationships with people. You know, the story progresses, there's lots of twists and turns in this, and I absolutely loved it because Alice was just so human throughout it. And then The Miseducation of Cameron Post. This was an emotional roller coaster. This is about a girl whose parents die. This is how the sort of story starts. It's on the back, it's no surprise. And she's basically dealing with her sexuality throughout. So she's in time, I think is it the 70s or 80s? I can't quite remember, but it's sort of in an era where homosexuality isn't overly spoken about, it isn't accepted. So it deals with the pressures that basically religion plays on this town and their attitudes towards people, and this is just a beautiful story. This is a story, as I was reading it, that I just kept thinking, this needs to be told and people need to read this basically. It's beautiful. Cameron is so relatable, and her struggles just growing up are like ours, but just exemplified by the fact that she's struggling with the fact that she is homosexual, and she lives under the roof of her aunt and grandmother, who are very, very against that. And you know, the story, I just never want to give too much away, but just the way this story unfolds, just exploring her relationships and how it's affected and how she's treated, it's just, it is a must read. So yeah, if you do take something away from this, I really, really would recommend reading this story because I loved it. I absolutely loved this book. So moving on to the books that I haven't yet read but I am super excited to jump into. We'll start with Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven. Now, Jennifer Niven, if you don't know, is the author of All the Bright Places, which was absolutely 100% my favorite book that I read last year. I adored that story. It stayed with me for so long after I read it. So if you haven't read All the Bright Places, definitely do yourself a favor and run out and grab that book because I loved it. Like, loved that book. So this is her follow-up novel. Again, another young adult. I'll just quickly read out the back. Everyone thinks they know Libby Stout, but no one's ever looked past her weight to see who she really is. Since her mum's death, Libby's been hiding, but now she's ready for high school. I want to be the girl who can do anything. Everyone thinks they know Jack Messelin too. Sexy, aloof, too cool for school. But Jack's swaggering confidence is hiding a secret that he must keep at all costs. Be charming, be hilarious, don't get too close to anyone. Then Jack meets Libby and their worlds change, because sometimes when you meet someone, the whole universe just comes into focus. So it really does sound like she's sticking to quite a similar formula that All the Bright Places took. We had a female protagonist, a male protagonist, and I'm quite excited about this because it already sounds like she's going to be touching on a lot of important topics that are really relevant to the age group, this young adult age group. So in All the Bright Places, she touched on mental illness a lot. That was pretty much one of the central focuses of the novel, and I really hope that she sort of follows suit and really does sort of have quite a strong lesson about maybe a mental illness sort of thing or self-esteem sort of issue, because I think that's just so important for sort of young adults to be reading and to be reminded that, you know, while it seems like it's taboo, people are opening up and speaking a lot more heavily about these topics. So, you know, it's nothing to be ashamed of, and yeah, I'm really quite looking forward to reading this. I think this is next on my pile to read. Then we have George Orwell's 1984. Winston Smith works for the Ministry of Truth in London, chief city of Airstrip 1. Big Brother stares out from every poster. The thought police uncover every act of betrayal. When Winston finds love with Julia, he discovers that life does not have to be dull and deadening, and awakes to new possibilities. Despite the police helicopters that hover and circle overhead, Winston and Julia begin to question the party. They are drawn towards conspiracy, yet Big Brother will not tolerate dissent, even of the mind. For those with original thoughts, they reinvented Room 101. So basically, from what I know of this is sort of set in a more dystopic sort of future. This, I think, is quite heavily focused on technology and sort of technology's descent. So obviously our generation is very pro-technology. I think it was almost a fearful thing at the time that this was written, but at the same time, I think this will be quite relevant still. I mean, Animal Farm touched on a lot of really important, more politically based topics. I'm sure this will be quite politically based as well, but I don't know, I really do think this will be interesting, and purely because I seem to have missed reading it in high school, even though most people have read this one. I'm really looking forward to sort of just knowing what this is about, reading up on it, and hopefully really enjoying this book. I do secretly have high hopes for it, so yes, I will be getting into that one quite soon. This one I'm quite excited about. This is The Tale of Two Imaginary Boys, Cured by Lol Tolhurst. The title is a reference to one of their albums. Cured is obviously The Cure, so it's a play on that. And I'll just quickly read out the blurb to you. So coming of age in Thatcher's Britain in the late 70s and early 80s was really rough, especially if you lived in Crawley. But against the grinding austerity, social unrest and suburban boredom, the spark of rebellion set alight three young men who would become one of the most revered and successful bands of their generation, The Cure. Cured is a memoir by Lol Tolhurst, one of the founding Imaginary Boys. Lol threads the genesis of The Cure through his schoolboy years with Robert Smith, the iconic leader of the group and the band's most successful era in the 1980s. Lol toured the globe many times over, supporting the groundbreaking albums Three Imaginary Boys, 17 Seconds, Faith and Pornography, before departing the band in 1989, at the time of their masterwork Disintegration. 2011 saw a momentous reunion tour, and Lol performed with his former bandmates for the first time in over 20 years. And I have to say, if I was there for that concert, I would just be so happy. So basically, this is Robert Smith, this is Lol Tolhurst. They were the band for some of the albums, but they were the founding members. Unfortunately, they went through a really bitter split, which ended up in a court case. And as far as I knew, that was it. They never spoke again. But this book tells his perspective from the band starting all the way through to the breakup, and then to this reunion that apparently happened, which I wish I'd known about. Not that I would have probably been able to get there, but you know what I mean. It's just, I love this band and I love reading anything about them. So I'm so excited. I did read a chapter of this. My mum actually bought me this when she was in England, and this was sort of like a little gift she brought back for me. And the first chapter, he writes so eloquently and really paints a picture of sort of how they were growing up and what the environment and atmosphere was, and how they sort of rebelled against that and became the band that they have become. So it's really, really interesting the way he speaks, especially about those early days, and I'm really, really quite excited to get into the rest of this story, because I know there is definitely a lot for him to talk about and tell in here. And now we'll probably end on the more boring one, I'll admit, Genetics for Dummies. This is just more like a personal study sort of thing for me. I finished my Bachelor of Advanced Science now. I'm actually graduating in a couple of days, which is so exciting. And I seem to have missed genetics at some point. Genetics is going to be super relevant to my future job, so I'm just going to catch up on that myself by doing a little bit of reading. Apparently this is going to take the jump into genetics, dig into DNA, toast to health, and get in the know. So hopefully I will very soon be in the know. I'm not going to pretend that I'm looking forward to going through this, but I think it's important for me. And that is it for the book haul. We did it, we got through them all. Like I said, I've managed to pick up a crazy amount of books. I mean, it's good. I like reading, and this is a different sort of video for this channel, and I would love to know if you guys like this sort of content. I mean, it's something so personal to me because, like I said, I do really love reading. So if you guys do love reading, please give it a thumbs up to just let me know if this is the sort of thing you'd like to keep seeing. If not, if you guys could give me some book recommendations on either your favorite book or books you are absolutely loving at the moment, I would be so grateful. I love hearing book recommendations. I am always buying books as gifts for my bookworm friends, for myself to read, and yeah, I'd love to hear any suggestions you guys have. And if you're new to my channel, please subscribe. It would help me out so much. And if not, I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!